let's compare the size difference and the fitment between the Renegade brackets and the standard brackets. We have the Retro Fox sitting right here with the satin SI on it, and let's just compare things. Now she's a dirty girl at the moment. I need to clean this thing up, but as you can see, we don't have the big brackets up front here. The supercharger itself is a little thinner right through here, which allows you more room for your cooling system. But overall, just a nice, neat little package going on with the SI. I really love this thing. It's a simple install in comparison, and you have tons of room in comparison. Okay, let's go over and compare that to this. We don't have as much room. Everything's a lot tighter down through here, and obviously there's a difference in the brackets. Bigger charge pipe, bigger inlet coming in. Everything is just oversized on this. I want to go ahead and give you guys a quick comparison as far as sound goes between the Retro Fox over here with the SI blower, Heritage gears by the way, and the TI trim V1. All right, guys, well, there's the sound difference between the SI with Heritage gears and the TI race trim on the gray car. So they're two completely different sounds. The red car makes more of almost like a whistling type sound. This blower makes more of a high pitch, like screaming sound. They sound completely different, but I love both of them just as much. So I just wanted to include that little bit of footage in here for you guys, for anybody who's wondering. As far as power, like if we're talking about that, they're both pretty comparable, believe it or not. This blower is not as far off as you might think from that blower, and that blower is not too far off from the YSI. But I'm gonna go ahead and leave you guys with that. Hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, thanks for watching. So I've had a few people ask, why are you pushing the supercharger content all of a sudden? You were into turbos, now you're into superchargers. Well, when we built the Calypso, that was the first turbo car that I ever had. But when we built the Retro Fox, that was also the first centrifugal supercharger that I personally had ever owned. Based off of the ease of install, I actually prefer the supercharger. Maybe with the exception, though, of the Renegade brackets, because those can be somewhat complicated, especially if you're trying to keep your mechanical fan. Outside of that, your standard bracket supercharger setup is pretty easy. It doesn't build up a lot of extra heat, and you make good power, and your power is based more off of RPM as to how much boost you make versus the turbo. Pretty much everything comes in all at one time. Now, I know something that gets brought up a lot is the fact that, this supercharger doesn't have an intercooler. Correct. So how do you combat that? Well, typically you don't have that big of an issue unless you're just beating the crap out of the car in the summertime. Contrary to popular belief, wide open throttle, at least up to a certain point, brings a cooler charge in. You have to think about what's going on here. You have to think about it this way. Once you crack the throttle open, you're sucking ambient air in, okay? So if it's a 60-degree day outside and you've got your filter over in the fender well, you're going to be sucking 60-degree air straight through. Now, it's probably not going to be 60-degree air by the time it makes it to the engine, but it's still going to be a cooler charge than this thing sitting there with the throttle blade closed and just idling, okay? You're actually going to cool the car off. Now, if you run this thing hard enough and long enough, those temperatures will go up for sure. But there's also the option of, E85, which helps keep the car cooler. You can also go meth injection, which is what we're doing on the gray car, and that will drastically keep those IATs a lot cooler. Very comparable, actually, to an intercooler. If you guys don't know, Richard Holdner has done some tests on this. As far as ultimate power goes, you really can't argue with a turbo setup. But here's the other issue that I don't really like about the turbo, and that is if you have an exhaust leak on your turbo, say from your downpipe where it connects to the back of your turbo, if you have a leak there, this can affect your tune drastically. Typically, though, it's not going to hurt your car, and the reason being your sensor is going to read that the car is lean, because you're going to be sucking air down through the pipe and it's going to cross in front of your wideband sensor, and your car is going to think, oh shit, we're lean, so it's going to try to add some fuel. The main issue is that it freaks your wideband out and your car thinks it's running lean, so it'll dump more fuel depending on what setup you have. Or it may just show that it's lean. Turbos are great, and for the most part, typically if you go with something like an On3 kit, it's going to be a little cheaper. I'm totally for a nice turbo setup, guys. I absolutely love it. And to be honest with you, the Carbon Fox would probably be a better candidate for the turbo setup that's on the Calypso, and the supercharger that's on the gray car would be better for the Calypso. That gives us options though, right? Later on we could come in and we could swap the two out with each other and we can see what happens. As of right now though, I really want to see what this T trim does on the Carbon Fox, because it does have a healthy little 306. It's got a decent bump in compression. It's got a good cam in it. It's got a really good set of heads. So I'm curious to see what happens with the built automatic. And maybe once this runs its course and we've had our fun with it, maybe we will swap the two out. Maybe, just maybe, we'll go carbureted on one of those cars and just do something completely different. I just wanted to include this tidbit of information towards the back of it because I get a lot of questions and comments about this. So why did you do this? Why did you do that? And also let me explain one more time why I chose not to go with an electric fan. I'm not against electric fans. I think they're great, but something in the back of my mind doesn't like all the extra wiring. See, I ran into this problem with the Calypso. The Calypso went from a very simple turbo build with just a plug-in Mega Squirt computer, no extra wiring, none of that stuff, to something that has a bunch of different wires running, to distribution blocks, grounds all over the place. Like, to run all this stuff, you really need to make some type of schematic once you get done with everything, because trust me, especially if you have more than one car, you can forget where all this stuff is wired up to. And I failed to do a schematic on the green car, and now I'm sitting there scratching my head like, where in the hell does all this go? Now, I understand we're comparing apples to oranges here. We're just talking about one fan, but I've also been bit by that myself. I don't like all of these controllers. I don't like all of that stuff. I want something that's as mechanical as it can be, meaning it's just going to work unless of course your clutch fan or something starts to go out. But that's a simple change, and you can also walk up to your fan with the car off and spin it and see if your clutch is bad, right? It's a very, very simple procedure. Anyway, that's my reason for not putting an electric fan on this car, but at some point we may have to. If for some reason I've had to trim too much of my fan shroud or notch my fan out to the point to where this thing doesn't cool very good, then there's a chance that we will have to go in with an electric fan. And I'm not against it at that point. But right now, this is something I wanted to try because I know a lot of you guys do like your manual fans as well. And so far, so good, but we'll see how that goes. If we end up with an electric fan, you guys don't have to tell me I told you so. I get it. It's just personal preference. I would like to stay away from it if at all possible. Well, all right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up. And as always, thanks for watching.